Suicide Prevention Megathread. Suicide Prevention Megathread. What sucks a lot for non-celebrities and poorer people is the cost of therapy. I don't currently have insurance, and while I know I should go see a therapist about stuff, I can't afford it. I'm sure other people are in that boat. For me it isn't so bad these days because I ended up meeting an awesome guy and getting engaged, but I've had a lot of extremely low points in my life where I could have used professional help. I remember when both my son and I needed to see a mental health provider, having to call over 20 different providers, many of whom didn't take insurance, to find someone in network who was accepting new patients. I was able to find someone in network for him, who he didn't feel like was a good fit, but due to insurance issues, couldn't do anything about it and eventually stopped going when he no longer felt in imminent danger. For myself, I couldn't find an in-network provider accepting new patients at all, so my primary care doctor prescribed me medication and had me get a therapist unaffiliated with her clinic. Then 6 months later I get a call from one of the providers I previously reached out to saying I got off their waiting list. I am very happy with the psych NP therapist I'm working with, but they are located an hour away from the major city where I live. As horrible as my experience finding providers has been, I'm also fortunate enough to have insurance, so I can imagine how much more challenging finding a provider is for the uninsured who can't afford it. As someone who's struggled with suicidal thoughts and still do on occasion, I'd like to advise against a trend I've noticed on Reddit. And it's this thing about instantly linking to suicide prevention organizations. I personally understand that it's meant with good intent, but on someone who is suicidal and not quite in their right mind, it often has the opposite effect of where it feels like you're being shoved into a corner or dumped as someone else's problem. More often than not, someone suicidal wants to talk to a normal person, someone who will care or listen to them. Of course, I am not telling strangers that you have to be that person. I know it shouldn't be anyone else's responsibility. All I am trying to say is that if you really want to help someone or make them feel better, linking them to something else is not a great way to go about it. It's much better worked into a conversation as a suggestion on the side. Again, I don't want to come off as a dick here. I think it's great that so many people care enough to want to encourage others to seek help, but try to keep this in mind. That feeling of being pushed away or getting a predictable and generic answer often makes you feel more isolated and more depressed. You're absolutely right, though. When people shove those links and numbers in my face, it triggers my anger, which for sure makes the situation worse. When I reach out to talk to someone, I'm looking for humanity. I'm looking for that human connection that websites can't provide. Yes, you do speak to an actual person on the hotline, but most of the time, they're quick to tell you to hospitalize yourself at a facility that does nothing to fix the problem beyond sticking a band-aid over it in the form of more medications. As someone who reacts negatively to these resources, I would only use them if the person who reached out for you for help is treating you as though you're a stand-in psychologist or psychiatrist. If your support doesn't seem to be helping, if this person is using you as a crutch to avoid doing any actual work to better themselves, only then should you suggest they need to find professional help through these resources, and make sure they know that you are not a professional but you do want to help in any way you're qualified to do so. I called the hotline in a Walmart parking lot once and the lady wasn't super helpful or anything. It just felt like an interrogation and had no emotional connection. It literally felt like I was the only person on earth while I was in that parking lot. That one late night, everybody blasts the number whenever someone takes their life, but it's not always a good resource. If I was on my last straw that night, the frustration from the call and immense feeling of loneliness that night probably would have drove me to the end. I attempted suicide as 19. I think the hardest thing for non-suicidal people to understand is that a lot of suicidal people don't want to kill themselves, they just want to stop existing. Actually going through the steps of writing a note and taking the pills was extremely difficult, and all I kept thinking the whole time was that it would be so much easier if I could just fall asleep and never wake up. It was scary to think that I was potentially killing myself, whereas a death I couldn't control or had less control over would just happen. Then there's everyone and everything else to consider. I also have caught myself wishing many times that the whole world would end so that I could stop existing, but then neither myself nor my loved ones would have to deal with the pain or miss out on a good life. I found those things really hard to articulate at 19. It's how a lot of depressed people feel. Saw this posted in another thread about boredom, and I thought it echoes what you're saying here. The so-called psychotically depressed person who tries to kill herself doesn't do so out of quote helplessness or any abstract conviction that life's assets and debits do not square, and surely not because death seems suddenly appealing. The person in whom its invisible agony reaches a certain unendurable level will kill herself the same way a trapped person will eventually jump from the window of a burning high-rise. Make no mistake about people who leap from burning windows. Their terror of falling from a great height is still just as great as it would be for you or me standing speculatively at the same window just checking out the view. That is, the fear of falling remains a constant. The variable here is the other terror, the fire's flames. When the flames get close enough, falling to death becomes the slightly less terrible of two terrors. It's not desiring the fall, it's terror of the flames. And yet nobody down on the sidewalk, looking up and yelling "Don't!" and "Hang on," can understand the jump. Not really. You'd have to have personally been trapped and felt flames to really understand a terror way beyond falling. David Foster Wallace. Depression is a scary thing. I hope you're doing better now, and it's great that you can candidly speak about your struggles. A person from my past reaching out to me, even for 5 minutes, does exceptionally more for my mental well-being than seeing 10,000 Redditors spam the numbers for different suicide prevention hotlines. Please reach out to the people in your life. You can keep it as light as you want. We're social creatures, and even limited interaction goes a very long way. The moments that old friends have reached out to me make my month, since it almost never happens. After a bad breakup, I had reached out to a few friends to just catch up and continued to talk about whatever, but eventually realized I was the only one ever initiating conversations. While they have no obligation to talk to me, I couldn't help but to feel like a burden on everyone, that they were just humoring me for the sake of being polite. I stopped initiating, and all of them I haven't chatted with in over a year now. Lack of human contact that isn't in a forced context, work, school, etc., goes a long way toward making someone already depressed feel even more isolated, and really pushes the internal narrative that everyone else would be much better off if I just wasn't around. I came here to say this: thinking of your friend from high school, send them a Facebook message and let them know they're on your mind. Hear about an old colleagues that got a promotion or new job, send them a text and say congratulations. Looking through your photos or videos from forever ago, send one to that old friend with some well wishes. I've had a moment like this when I was in my darkest place, and it really was a ray of light. This is an excellent way to describe it. I feel exactly the same way. Some days there's only a little snow, but some days it's a blizzard. Some days it's in between. My depression and anxiety make it hard for me to function like a normal person. When it's really bad, I start falling behind in school. My house is a mess. I'm late for work, etc. My family likes to joke that I'm lazy, which I might be, but some days I just don't have the willpower or energy to function, and it's hard to explain that to people. My anxiety often results in insomnia, and the lack of sleep makes my depression worse, and it becomes a vicious cycle. Luckily I'm on decent meds now which help, but I'm still trying to be better. Thank you for putting this into words. I got my first dog for exactly the same reason. I am a much better person because of him. I don't even remember what life was like without a dog. The few months after his passing and before I got my current dog were some of the hardest time of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't concentrate on anything and lost like 20 pounds in a month. I would sit on the sofa for hours and just stare into space or look at pictures, video of him and crying non-stop. It didn't get better with time and my family/friends/co-workers all got super worried and basically demanded that I get another dog ASAP. I still can't look at video of him without bawling my eyes out, but the new puppy has gotten my life back to a good place again. I work at Poison Control. One of our main jobs is to provide advice to hospitals caring for patients who have overdosed. I will never forget one teenage girl who took an overdose of Tylenol, and apparently regretted it shortly afterwards but was afraid of telling anyone. She didn't tell anyone until 3 days later. She walked into the ER awake and talking and died waiting for a liver transplant. She left behind a heartbroken family and more friends than she realized she had. If you come to the hospital within a few hours of taking pills, it can be fixed. Don't be afraid to get the help you need. I did this. I swallowed a bottle of ibuprofen, said oh fuck and went to the ER. The activated charcoal was not fun, but I'm alive and happy 10 years later. Also, side note, my idol Scott Hutchinson jumped off a bridge a few weeks ago. I can't emphasize enough how much this has hurt everyone who was given hope by the messages in his music. We're all his family and we're all grieving together now. Whoever is reading this, please reconsider and get help. I did. You can too. A friend of mine attempted an OD with pills last fall. Absolutely fast help is necessary. That friend nearly went into heart failure and they called the ambulance themselves right after taking the pills. They had to be monitored for days on the cardiac floor before even going to the psych ward. Funny enough, their attempt was my reality check to not attempt. I had been highly suicidal for months due to medical issues. I was depressed because I had no clue what was happening with my body and no one could give me answers. Thankfully, a few months after that incident with the friend, I got a positive test and recently a diagnosis. It isn't curable, but it isn't killing me either. My old life isn't something I can get back, but honestly I am not sure I want it. I am finally able to enjoy living. I'm the mother of a toddler who died of cancer. There was nothing anyone could do to prevent me from killing myself besides listening and being present. I didn't reach out to anyone. Being suicidal means you want to die. No one could have talked me out of it. My family knew I was struggling and they took shifts watching me. They bought me my favorite foods, watched RuPaul's Drag Race with me for weeks. Seriously. For some reason it was the only thing I could watch. They listened to me cry and didn't try to give me solutions. They just said I know. We had a code word potato. If I said potato, that meant that I needed someone to be physically present with me. Quickly, there was always a plan for the next day. Tomorrow we're going to have lunch at that Mexican place, okay? Tomorrow let's look for a special garden marker for Miles. I think that was a big part of it. Having a plan for the next day meant I had to keep going. It's been almost 4 months since my 3-year-old died and I'm still living. That's pretty fucking amazing. I also lost a son named Miles. He was a week old. It was sudden. One day he was healthy, pink, and screaming. The next he was blue and going into cardiac arrest. He would be turning 10 this July 2nd. My only show I can watch was the awful dating show Next on MTV. The night he died, my husband, boyfriend at the time, and I sat in a hotel room, because we couldn't possibly go home and face his stuff, and played a cooperative board game all night long. We took breaks to cry and scream, and then kept playing. That stupid game kept me alive. I'm sure of it. I also had to always have a plan for tomorrow, even if it was just what I was going to have for breakfast. There were days that I would cry so hard I thought the crying alone would kill me. I had to force myself to stop, certain I was about to literally die of a broken heart. I'm so sorry for your loss. 4 months is still so fresh. I'm nearly a decade out, and some days I still can't believe I'm a member of this shitty club. Understand that the grief may come in waves, close together and fierce at first, and then slowing down, giving some time and space before the next one pummels you. Make sure your support people are still around in case you need to call out potato again. 6 months from now, I can be one of those support people. There is nothing that makes it easier, but time and support can help it be more manageable. Also, Talking about him can help. I hated that once he was gone people wanted to pretend he never existed. Fuck that. Your son was here, and he was amazing. Talk about him. Much love to you and your Miles. 3. Oh honey, I bawled my eyes out reading your post. I don't know you, but I am so proud of you, and I want you to know that I have love for you. I would love nothing more than to give you a big hug and eat some pizza and make some mojitos. I think maybe I want to hug you because I just want a hug right now. Lol. More for me than you. 3 Haha. You're an incredible person and that code word is legit. I have one too. It's Shakespeare. It's a little play on how dramatic and morbid he was. Lol. Keep on keeping on lady. Much love from one mother to another. I suffered a traumatic loss around the same age that pales in comparison, and it very negatively affected my life for a long time. I have been able to come to terms only decades later, and only somewhat. One thing I realized was that my reliving the event, over and over, in my mind was very much a way of making it happen. Again and again, I realized I was putting my loved one through the pain, if only in my head, repeatedly. This realization helped me stop obsessing on the event. I hope you have found peace. I wish this was up last week. A very close friend of mine committed suicide in the second. She was only 19 and could light up a room when she came in. The worst thing is feeling like I could have stopped her. After work the day before she asked me if I wanted to go out. I didn't because I was tired and had to clean. My heart hurts. Her memorial was yesterday. It's still such a raw wound. I'm sorry I had to get this off my chest. Edit. Thank you all who've messaged me or replied with support and their own experiences. I know logically it wasn't my fault but emotionally it hurts. I'm slowly starting to accept what happened but it will be a while before I'll be back to normal. Also to the asset that messaged me and told me it was my fault, go fuck yourself. Almost exactly a year ago one of my best mates called drunk in the middle of the night telling me that he was going to end it, and he wanted to apologize for doing this and thank me for being the only one to support him. I got so fucking scared and started calling people that had been on the same party that he attended earlier and managed to find him nearby walking alone towards the rail tracks. I ran towards him and stopped him. We talked for almost 5 hours straight that night. We agreed for him to try therapy. It worked, at least for him, and now he is on his way back up pursuing a career in graphic design. I urge everyone who feel depressed at least try to talk to someone, your family, friends or a therapist. Hotline as might help more than you think. My mom killed herself on April 22nd of this year. My dad found her naked, fallen off the side of the bed, with 3 empty pill bottles, 2 knives, and a razor. She was covered in vomit. The ambulance came, but she was unresponsive. They waited until I arrived to ask if they could stop resuscitation attempts, which they tried to do for over an hour. We went and when they stopped, she was half covered with the sheet. There was a lot of blood and vomit. Her ribs were broken from resuscitation attempts. She was just gone. My dad and I are totally lost. Last December I checked into a psych ward instead of killing myself. Fuck depression. I lost my mother to suicide as well on March 10, 2010. I happened to be the one to find her and had a really rough first year without her. I was forcibly checked into a 72-hour hold around Mother's Day that year. My heart goes out to you and your father. You may be lost now but take it from someone who has been in your shoes. You will not be lost forever. You may wander throughout your life because pain like this does not go away but you will not remain lost. Fuck depression and keep talking about it. 3. When I was a teenager I had bad problems with depression and anxiety that led to very self-destructive behavior. There were many times I imagined killing myself and one night I was set on doing it. Came home drunk and sad and started cutting myself, which was one of my methods for dealing with my emotions. I sat in my bed crying, trying to find the courage to cut deeper and end it. Then my dog Snoopy hopped up on the bed and put his head on my lap. Thanks to him I realized that I just couldn't do that to him or to my parents and friends. He saved my life that night. The next day I decided to open up to my parents and ask them to help me find some help, which was a huge step forward. Sometimes all it takes is a reminder that someone loves you to help you start trying to love yourself. My mom took her life when I was 12. A year after my parents had separated. Afterwards I lived with my dad and my little sister, and took a big role in raising her while battling my own depression and self-harm. 10 years later, just when I was starting to get in good place emotionally, my sister jumped off a bridge. She was 18 years old. It's been a few years since she took her life, and what I've learned is that no matter how much better you think your family would be without you, that's just not true. I miss my mom. And I miss having a mom. My sister was my best friend, and even after all the tough things she put me through over the years, drug addiction, stealing, etc., it was so worth it to have her around. I think about her every day and would do anything to have her back.